welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Beth Ricanati, and she's here today to share with us her new book, Braided, A Journey of 1,000 Challahs. Dr. Beth has built her career around bringing wellness into women's everyday lives, especially busy moms juggling life and children. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania and her MD from Case Western Reserve University. She completed her internal medicine residency at Columbia Presbyterian in New York City. She has spent 10 years in practice at the Columbia Presbyterian Women's Health Center, the Cleveland's Clinic Center for Women's Health, and the Cleveland's Clinic Wellness Institute. In addition to her frequent online writing, Dr. Ricanati has been a guest contributor for television, print, and online media. She's published medical articles in peer-reviewed journals. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Beth Ricanati.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here. My goodness. I mean, your book, I can see why it's been so popular. I mean, it's just what everyone wants is this kind of comfort book, you know?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that you see it that way because that's definitely how I see it.
Well, and so for our listeners, why don't you share with us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book?
Absolutely. So really briefly, 10 years ago, when I was a young mom, we have 3 children, and working as a physician, I was completely overwhelmed and stressed out, and I was trying to do everything and do it well and do it all at once, and that's really hard to do. And so I wasn't succeeding. And luckily, at about this time, a friend of mine and I were talking right before the Jewish holidays that fall, and she suggested I make challah, which at the time was an absurd suggestion if you knew me because I didn't bake anything. Okay, maybe I made brownies out of a box, but I wasn't a baker. But I don't know, something that she said really resonated with me, and I stopped that day and I made the challah, and at the risk of some hyperbole, I think it changed my life because I was there at my kitchen counter. I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't sending an email. I wasn't picking up the kids' toys. Nothing. I was just, hands deep in a bowl of dough. And I don't know if you've, done anything sort of tactile like that, but it's really powerful. You have to be there. And it's an amazing feeling. I was completely hooked.
Well, yeah, you're so right. I mean, you have to be so present because there's no rushing getting that process together.
No, and in fact, that's one of my favorite lessons that I've learned through this whole process. And there's so many lessons that I've learned, but you can't rush it. You're absolutely right. You have to be patient. I mean, you have to wait for the yeast, and then you have to bubble and froth, and then you have to wait for the dough to rise. And it's a great reminder I get every week. Just stop. You have to wait, and it spills over, luckily, into other areas of my life, which is fantastic.
Well, it sounds like you've taken these life lessons. And that's kind of what's really a beautiful part of Braided. It's really getting people to refocus and center themselves.
Exactly. And to that point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, it really doesn't have to be just about baking bread. I mean, that's my meaningful ritual, and I think it's fabulous. All I care, though, is that you have a meaningful ritual. And whether that's gardening or whether it's dancing or whether fill in the blank. I just think it's so important to have something.
Yeah, to have something that you're doing. Well, and it's interesting because, when you have something that cannot be rushed, it really calls for you to be more mindful and be more present on what's happening, to take those pauses throughout the day. And it puts you, I think, in a greater state of gratitude.
That's for sure. And I think we all could use that. And honestly, I think we all feel better when it's part of our lives. And what a wonderful thing.
Well, and so why don't we talk a little bit about when you first started making challah? Was it, did you feel like you were just going to throw it all against the wall, or how was that process for for you.
Well, I had to call Abby 4 times that day, and there are only 6 ingredients in the recipe. So, yeah, it was a little challenging for me. And I didn't get it perfectly that first day, but it was certainly good enough that we were all so excited when we had it for dinner that night. And our house, it smelled like a home. I don't know if you've baked bread before, but that is an incredible aroma when you are baking bread and then you open the oven doors and wow, that smell, it's powerful. And so it definitely took a while to where I got to a point where now I'm just there. I don't pull out the recipe. I don't really think about all of that. It's an opportunity to really focus on other things because it's become such a ritual and a habit and a part of of what I do every Friday. But it took a little while to get there, that's for sure. A lot of trial and error.
I can imagine. Well, and you mentioned you've been doing this, every Friday, and from my understanding, from like the past 10 years. So what inspired you to do that as a tradition?
So challah is, as a sort of a backstory, challah is a bread that we have on Friday nights at Shabbat dinner in the Jewish tradition. And while I hadn't grown up being very observant and celebrating Shabbat, my husband brought that tradition when we were married. And I really found once I started making challah, it became a great touch point to having Friday night dinner. So it was easy to continue because not only was the challah yummy and everyone loved it, but then we could all gather on Friday nights. So I do make challah, as you mentioned, on Friday nights and have been doing that now for 10 years. And I do it literally almost every Friday night. Once in a while, obviously, especially if we're traveling, but there are times when I don't make it, and then we joke that there's an 11th commandment in our house, and we keep a frozen challah on standby, and sometimes we have to pull that out of the freezer. But it's become a wonderful anchor to our family, and to have this as part of our weekly life, if you will.
Is it something that you've been teaching your children how to do, or friends? Or
it's actually really fun. So when I started, as I said, we had 3 kids, and so the older 2 were one was in elementary and one was in nursery school, but the youngest was home, and so she was really involved with me at that time. And in fact, she coined the term painting because we put an egg wash on the bread before we put it in the oven, and she loved to paint that, and it's become a fun memory. And now, for example, our middle one, so now the kids are obviously grown up, or not, they're older, and our middle one now is making it with his friends occasionally on Fridays, which I just adore. So yes, it's become all part of all of their lives as well, which is also fun. I love the tradition of it and the sort of passing down from generation to generation.
Well, and you talk about this being and we kind of touched on a little bit about being kind of a mindful practice. So What does that all mean to you when we talk about getting into this state where you're, really kind of, you're making challah and it has this really deep connection, both spiritually and personally. How does that all come together in mindfulness for you?
In a couple of different ways. So about 5 years ago, I began to learn the history around challah. I didn't. Prior to that, I hadn't appreciated sort of all of the rich history around it and the meaning for the thousands of years. And one of the really great things that I learned was before you start, so I set up all the ingredients, I get everything out, but before you start, you have to actually think about, why am I doing this? And in whose merit am I going to make the dough this week? And it's a great opportunity to stop for a moment and think, maybe it's something really simple, like one of the kids was studying hard for a test, and I'm going to make the dough this week in the merit of all of their hard work. Or maybe it's something really, for example, we have a family member, extended family member who was recently diagnosed with cancer, and when I found that out, I made it in his merit. So it can run the gamut of meaning. And when I make it with other women, as I did last week, for example, it's really powerful to all be standing around the kitchen counter and to start to talk about, who are we making the dough in the merit of this week? Who are we going to bless this week? It's a really powerful moment that just brings you front and center right here, right now, with intention as you begin the activity. So that's one. And then two, later on, when you knead the dough, I don't know if you've done that before, but when you get your hands in a bowl of dough, Marianne, it's the most incredible feeling. You're just there. And I write in the book about how I knead for my needs, because I do. And it's a really wonderful meditative practice that I get to do every week. I love that. And I love looking forward to it. And I know that, next Friday I get to do it all over again. I think that's really great.
What a great tradition, because it really is steeped in that. And when we look at, challah as part of the Jewish tradition and cuisine, it must feel, just I can see where it'd be very heart-centered making that every Friday and sharing it with your family, friends, and other people that you come across.
Yes, it is so fun to share that, by the way. Absolutely. And bring people along.
Yeah. Well, and that's why the book is so popular, People are just loving this book. It's getting such great reviews. And as soon as I heard about it, gosh, we have to talk. Yeah, congratulations. What a beautiful accomplishment. And
it's really fun, I have to say, having never done anything like this. It's been quite
well. Yeah, you did a beautiful job pulling this all together and really making it so it really can be a personal journey, a journey with your family. It's a lot more than making challah. There's
absolutely
a lot in that.
That's almost just the metaphor for all of these other lessons and thoughts. Absolutely. And it has been part of the fun of reading the reviews and talking with people since the book came out. It came out in September, so I've had an opportunity for the last couple months to interact with a lot of people about it. And it's fun to hear everybody's stories and what is their meaningful ritual. I met someone 2 weeks ago whose ritual is to have brunch with her grandchildren once a week, and I think that's incredible. Different people have think about this and acted upon it in different ways, which is fantastic. And really, quite frankly, the point of one of the main points of why I wrote the book in the first place.
Do you find that the meditative behavior behind, making challah kind of transfers to other parts of your life as well?
Yes, I do. And I think that's in part what has enabled me to sustain this for 10 years and counting, precisely because I find that the lessons that I've learned on a given Friday spill over into the rest of the week. And I find myself, if I'm frustrated in line at the grocery store, or we live in LA, so sitting in traffic, and I remember that, I was working on patience while the dough was rising. Like I could think about being patient now, or just stopping to think on another day during the week about being more present and just slowing down. We rush, and one of the great things I've learned about this is to be a little more intentional. And I do, fortunately, now think about that in the rest of my life, which is lovely, by the way.
That is just a beautiful thought, and I can see where people are really taking this and incorporating it in their own homes, from your book, Braided. There's just so much there. And in your book, you talk about food as medicine and just, the whole thought behind what we put in our bodies and what it means. Oh,
it's so important. And I didn't know that, when I went to medical school 25 years ago, I think we had an hour of nutrition, honestly. We just didn't. And I didn't really start to learn about it until probably 12 or 15 years ago, and really incorporate it into both my practice, as a physician, and then in my own life. And I've come to believe fervently that the foods that we eat can have such a dramatic impact on our overall well-being, both in a positive and, quite frankly, in a negative. So it can be as simple as, adding spices to your food because they're so good for you, And it can also be thinking about how much sugar are you eating. I cringe now. I used to take my kids when I'd go to Starbucks 10 years ago when I was frantic and grabbing my coffee on the go. I'd get them those little organic milk that they sell there. And I thought, oh, that's so great. Like the little chocolate milk. It's in a cute carton. It's got 24 grams of sugar or some, staggering amount of sugar. Like that's not so good. And I think about it every week now when I make challah because I think about the ingredients. I haven't changed the recipe itself one iota. I'm afraid to, quite frankly. It works, it's great, and I love it. But I've changed the quality of the ingredients because I know better. So the egg, for example, I used to just buy eggs. I didn't know that there's actually a difference between eggs. And you can do this. It's a fun experiment. You go to the grocery store and buy the cheapest eggs you can find and then get the most expensive, or maybe you're at a farmer's market and get those eggs, the organic, cage-free, et cetera egg. Crack one of each into 2 separate bowls and take a look at the yolk. And you'll just pause because the cheap egg is this pale, anemic-looking yolk. Pale yellow. And then the other egg, the yolk is this rich golden saffron. It's just a yummy color. Like, A, don't you want to eat it? And B, I want all those nutrients in my body. If I'm going to actually eat something, I want it to work for me. And I want to feel better. I think that's incredibly powerful.
We have so many options nowadays with the knowledge that we have.
Right.
So when we look at the free-range chickens and they're just able to run loose and the difference that makes all the way around,
Yeah, it's really great that it's getting more accessible, and that we're learning more about this. I think it's really incredible. Chronic diseases are 75% lifestyle driven, and when I talk about that, and when you look at the research. Nutrition, so food that we eat, exercise, and stress management. Those are the big ones. So having a behavior such as making challah, it's healthy. Having a meaningful ritual in your life is healthy. And there's a lot of data that supports that. And I love that because sometimes the world feels a little bit out of control. And I want to control it or be able to influence the outcome. And if what I eat or if I moved my body today or if I figured out a way to manage my stress today can impact that, well, then I'm all in. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and make those adjustments. And it's interesting because when we look at how we, making something from scratch like challah, being able to be present, and having this as a family tradition where your family's now incorporating it. It's just healthy all the way around. Yes.
And I think it's, to your point, it's great in terms of the family. I think it's great role modeling. I can talk about stress management all I want, but if I'm not actually practicing stress management, then it rings rather hollow. And our kids are watching us, and our actions definitely speak louder than our words. So I think it's really important to practice it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We've got kids now that are overly stressed, and I think a lot of that, they feel this pressure. They're picking it up at home. But when you live in the LA area, I used to live in Orange County. The traffic's horrendous. It takes forever to get anywhere. So we look at that and just the stress that we just have on our daily lives. Just getting from one place to another is very stressful. And then you have work. With you being a physician, that's got to be stressful as well. And you look at all these things, and what a great way to be able to come full center.
Yeah, that's a nice way to think about it. Coming full center. It really is. And for me, I love this because it touches on so many things. In addition to having a weekly ritual, it's about community and bringing people together and sharing something, in this case, the bread, which I really like all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love how in your book you dive into each of the ingredients. It was great care is taken with each portion, and you're discussing, you have discussions in regards to the things that people would think is kind of like, hey, well, how about salt? How important is the right kind of salt in this mixture?
Yeah, it's fun. I do include a section on each of the ingredients, and I found it really helpful as I was learning how to make the bread, and I also found it helpful because as a physician, it made me really rethink. Okay, well, what about sugar? I mentioned earlier that sometimes too much sugar is not healthy, and I really had an opportunity to think about that as I was. The recipe calls for a quarter of a cup of sugar. That's it, and it makes 2 loaves of challah. If you're doing a 3 braided, or 1 big 6 braided. And it really was a great opportunity for me to stop and really think about, okay, everything in moderation, Beth. It's okay. Like, I'm not going to take the sugar out of the challah, but I'm also not eating the entire loaf myself. So it's a great reminder for me, and hopefully for those around me, to really, it's okay. Like, you can have a piece of bread. It's okay. And I try and think about that, when I'm in clinic with my patients, the same thing. Like, usually the conversation is about moderation, because I think in general, that's a good way to live our lives, which transcends all of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and have you ever made challah without like any of the ingredients? Maybe you're, when you first started, maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to use less sugar, or maybe no salt, or have you ever made some alterations and then decided that probably wasn't the way you wanted to go?
Yes. So I tried, actually, in the spirit of being a physician, I tried to make whole wheat challah. And by the way, there's some fabulous whole wheat challahs that I've since had. However, my mistake was that I tried it with this recipe, and I didn't alter the recipe at all. I just tried it with whole wheat flour. And given the ratio of everything, it didn't work. In fact, it was awful. And again, it was a reminder to me, and I went back to just making it with good old-fashioned white flour. And it was a reminder to me again about moderation and keeping things in perspective. And a piece or even a couple pieces of challah a week isn't the end of the world. I do, in general, recommend, both in my practice and in my personal life, to steer clear of a lot of white processed foods. I don't think in general they're probably that healthy. But with that said, again, a piece of challah on Friday is okay. And I probably wouldn't have even, I'm grateful for the opportunity that I tried to change it up and that it didn't work. And it was a great reminder, not everything works. It's okay.
Well, it's good to have those experiences where you're trying something new and seeing what will work and what won't. And, going back to the tried and true recipe kind of is like, wow, okay, I'm going to stick with this, or I'm going to add different things to it, maybe toppings or flavors or things like that.
Yes, well, speaking of that, so I write in the book that I was all about plain challah, and my default still, I'm all about plain challah. Part of that, it comes back to the mindfulness and the meditation. I can just be and not have to be worrying and stressed out about what else am I going to add. However, I have learned in the last couple months, as I'm meeting more and more people who make challah, there's some fabulous ways to make challah that I had no idea about. People are doing the most creative things when they make challah, and I do think I'm going to have to start branching out a little bit and trying some of it because it just sounds really fun.
Well, and I love your motto, see one, do one, teach one, so it's
Welcome to medical school.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings in community when you do that.
Right? It really does. It really does, which I like, and I think there's something really powerful to that. I love making challah on Fridays with other people. I think it's really fun, and if they've never made it before, it's so fun to share that with them. And then I know they're going to go off and do it themselves, and I love that.
Yeah. Carry on the tradition with their families.
Right. I think that's incredible.
Was there anything that surprised you when you started your challah journey? Was there anything that surprised you that you maybe learned about yourself, during this whole process?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. I think there are probably a lot of different things. I mean, first and foremost, that I could actually make challah. It seemed overwhelming to me before I did it. The only challah that I'd had I don't know if I'd had homemade challah, honestly, before that. I'd had the challah from the bakery, and it's always so beautiful. I mean, mine looks homemade. Mine is not beautiful and smooth and glazed and I mean, it doesn't look like it's not professional. So the fact that I could even do it was a home run. And then that I could stick with it has been it's been great, and it's been a great lesson to me when other things get difficult and sometimes I want to give up. It's nice to know that I've stuck with this and I can stick with something. And I find that really helpful. And then all of these other, I mean, we touched on, patience earlier and things like that. So there are lots of sort of just little lessons in the actual making of the bread each week. But probably some of the bigger lessons have been that, I can try something new. It gets back to this idea. I love this concept of neuroplasticity that I learned about through the work of Carol Dweck, and she writes about the growth mindset and how we're not fixed, and we can develop and change. And I think that's probably been honestly one of the biggest lessons is that I didn't have a practice where I didn't have a great practice to manage my stress 10 years ago, and I certainly wasn't a baker 10 years ago. But I wasn't fixed. I could develop and my behaviors could change. And by making bread every week, I was strengthening that connection. So it became easier. And the easier it became, the more I did it. And the more I did it, it's this lovely sort of cycle. And now I've changed my behavior, and I make challah every week. And when I don't make challah, I miss it, and I'm definitely making it the next week. So it's not something that I stop and then I stopped, and that was the end of that.
And I applaud you because you put this in such a way that's really easy for people to pick up and do. I mean, it takes you have to pay attention, you have to be mindful and be just present. You can't be doing 20 things at the same time, and who would want to? But what's great about this, my great grandmother used to teach us how to make Portuguese sweetbread, and it's like the Hawaiian sweetbread.
Oh, fun!
Oh my. Yeah, except that you're kneading the bread for 45 minutes. And then it's like an all-day deal, for a loaf of bread. And so it's nice to have these traditions that people still can incorporate in their lives, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's, it's a weekend. You have to plan a weekend to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. That is actually one of the lovely things about this, is that it's not all-encompassing. And I don't know if it would have been sustainable for me, quite frankly. Certainly at the time 10 years ago, when I was so overwhelmed, I think if I might have done it once and thought, okay, I did it once, that was fine. But the very fact that this is such a simple recipe and a simple activity helps to keep it sustainable. And so when I talk to others about having a meaningful ritual, that is actually one of the criteria for me, is that it is simple enough that you can sustain it. Because if you set the bar too high, then it's not going to work.
No. I'm actually living proof of that. On that one. Because Portuguese sweetbread, it's probably ending with this generation. Sorry, great-grandma. But, it is an all-day deal.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to sustain that. But you've got it. You can go back to it periodically.
Well, and, what I appreciate about your book, you talk about, it's really, yes, it's about challah, and you've got this recipe in here, and you're telling people how to do it, how to incorporate it, but it's really more of a cookbook in many ways for your life. Like, how can I be, and we've talked about this, a few times already, but how can I be just more present in my life and slow down and be able to enjoy the things that are around me? And I felt the Braided was perfect for that.
Good. I achieved my goal then. That's fantastic, because that's what I want my readers to get from the book. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's sure you can read the book and make challah. And one of the most wonderful things that's now happening is I'm getting these fantastic emails and photos of people making challah, which is super fun. However, it's more than that, and you just honed in on that, which I really appreciate.
Well, I'm sure your readers, and our readers will as well pick up on that right away because it's just so beautifully written. So you should be very proud of Braided because you did a beautiful job at that. And
I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, you can tell because it's a very personal journey in many ways.
Yes, it is, and it continues to be, which is fun.
Well,
I made more challah in the last 2 months.
Every day is Friday, right?
I know. It's really fun. It's really fun.
What advice would you give maybe a novice baker? They've picked up Braided, they've got all the ingredients, they're ready to just start getting things going in the kitchen. What advice would you give them?
To just do it. Nike is right. You just got to do it. And it may not work the first time, and that's okay. I write about the yeast, for example, and I had never worked with yeast, and I ruined so many batches of yeast because I use a regular acting yeast and the dry acting yeast, not the quick rapid rise yeast. And you have to add a little sugar and warm water. And that's the kicker, warm water. So I often in the beginning would add either boiling water or cold water. And if it's boiling water, then you've killed the yeast. And if it's cold water, then you haven't activated it in the first place. But you just got to try. Just get in there. It's fun. And sometimes the mistakes end up being even better. So I'm all about just do it.
Well, I think that's great advice because a lot of times people can get a little fearful when they get in the kitchen, like, oh, I may be baking for the first time, or I may start a new family tradition. And you're all hands in, flour, everything. Let's just make it.
Yeah, just make it. And then send me a picture because I want to see.
Well, I will be making it too. I can't guarantee my picture's going to look anywhere good, good enough to post anywhere, but I'm sure that you'll have plenty that are coming up. And, I'd love for you to share with us where our listeners can connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about all the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. So a couple different places. One, I have a website, which is housecallsforwellness.com. And two, with that same name, I'm on Instagram, House Calls for Wellness, and I post an idea every morning. And three, I'm on Facebook as Beth Ricanati Author. And I'd love to have you join in and come along for the journey.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm connected with you. I highly suggest everyone do as well. Get connected with you. Go to your website, sign up for your newsletter, and, of course, pick up their own copy of Braided. I mean, what a great book. I just loved it. You did such a beautiful job on that.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to share this with everybody.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, it's I who thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Beth. It has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Braided, A Journey of 1,000 Challahs. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Ricanati in regards to her book and the information she provides on her website, you can at housecallsforwellness.com, and we'll have the link below. Braided is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. And if it's not on the shelf, of course, remember to ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.